I am Jonathan Humphreys. Welcome to the Hokoso Conversation. Welcome to the Hokoso Conversation. Today's guest is Mariana Palmeiro. She is a wellness expert. Life has been around well-being and looking after oneself in the art of prevention. She is an educator, consultant, and thought leader. At these times, we need to focus on all aspects of building our inner immunity and our resilience. Our mental health is one of these things that is under extreme pressure during this current time. This is a wide-ranging discussion on wellness, creativity, and the importance of mental health. We'll also be looking into the future in terms of what that means with regards to the technology, neuroscience, and enabling our neuroplasticity. I hope you enjoy this wide-ranging conversation, which will hopefully give you some tools, techniques, and opportunities to look at our behaviors in order to help us to build our resilience for the future. Thank you very much. So, Mariana, first of all, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's a real pleasure. Mariana, I guess we'll just start with some background for the audience, just in terms of your fascination and interest in wellness generally, in terms of when it first started. When did you start to become aware that this was something that was important to you?
Well, I must say very early on, and I was lucky that I found a way to match my career later on to what I felt was already part of my personality, but part of my just natural interests in life. Growing up, I was always told I was very mature for my age, that I could put things in words very easily, I could observe the world around me, and I didn't see it very well at first. I just thought everyone was being nice to me. But I did have an interest in the arts. I loved playing the piano because it allowed me to have time for myself, because it would also be something very intuitive, very beautiful. It was just very enlightening. And I did a lot of dancing, and I loved being with people. I was very sociable. I loved interacting. I loved listening. I would listen to people's stories and come back and think about them a little bit more. So I think all of these very slowly development of your traits and the way you relate to people, it just brought me this natural interest in people and in what makes them happy and what makes them balanced. And I didn't know it was there, but now looking back, I'm able to see that the way I developed myself personally just was a match to this type of interest later on in my career and also in my personal life. Of course, I studied economics, but then I studied hospitality. And when I went into the hospitality world, it was just an immediate attraction to, at the time, the spa and wellness movement. It was growing, and I just felt immediately connected to this idea of enticing people to travel to a place to change their life somehow, to make them relax, to make them look at themselves in a more intense way. And I think it just all flew very easily, and it just became very much a part of myself and my development.
So how old were you when you say it started very early on?
I would say I was probably 6 or 7, when people started having these observations about me, when I started my development in art. So I think, I didn't have to meditate when I was young. I just did it very naturally. I remember we had this workshop, which was very unheard of at the time, about what we would now call mindfulness. And I remember I was looking at the teacher and I was thinking, well, and this was primary school years. And I was looking at her saying, this is what I do every day when I walk to school. I think about what's my day going to be like and what are the things I love about life. And that's why sometimes I make drawings or, so she was talking to me and I'm like, is this new to anyone here? So I think I can relate as early as that, having this understanding, this sensitivity about being well and reflecting on how to be well. It was very natural, I must say.
That's incredible. You said that there was a natural alignment with hospitality and yet wellness. What year are we talking when you started to do your studies in hospitality?
So in 2006, I went to Cornell University and I did my master's in hospitality hospitality management. So I was coming from a background in business studies. I worked in banking. I knew I liked the part of business that is about developing concepts and putting things together. So that was my left side of the brain, the analytical, the putting things in place. But when I got to Cornell, it's very American style education. You know what you're going for. You have to learn to be straight to the point. You have to be clear about your ideas. You have to be assertive about what you want. And that was very different from the education I had in Europe. In Europe, it's all about you have a topic, it's not blurry, and then you go around it and you make all of these assumptions. And then in the end, the conclusions are more about how well you were able to elaborate on something. It's not so much, this is what I found out, this is the reasons that support it, this is the data, and this is my outcome. That's it. Let's go. So that was a shock for me, having to be a lot more direct, a lot more assertive. But in the hospitality industry in particular, I realized that it was just so much about your passion. I would see the other schools in Cornell, it was very focused, very driven. And in the hospitality school, it's very much follow your passion, a bit of that American dream excitement, which is very driving and very compelling. And I fell in love with finding what my passion was going to be. And I felt very comfortable about saying that my passion might be a bit different from what everybody else was doing. So my colleagues were very much going into the real estate, the development. Of course, the ones coming from operations were going back into operations and having an F&B rooms division. And then I found a spa course. And I realized, okay, what's this about? In Europe, you go to spas and thermal destinations. It's quite common as a culture. But I could see that in the hospitality world, it was really developing and there was a lot of space for creativity as well. So you put all these things together. 25-year-old European woman wants to travel the world after doing Cornell studies. And this was just the perfect fit for me. It's a growing industry. It's about making people happy, about forcing them or enticing them to take a step back and reevaluate their life. And everything was happening. I mean, you could basically create any concept within this field because there was so much going on. So it was an immediate fit for me. After doing the US environment, I felt Asia would be the next step. And that's really because you can do whatever you want. There's so much space for creativity and creations and development. So I went to Asia to work on development of these types of topics.
One of the things that jumped out at me was obviously the mantra about following your passion. And you're right, it seems everybody's talking about it today. Back then, obviously, as you highlighted, it was more of a US phenomena, especially in education. And I was fortunate to spend some time studying in Chicago as well. And it was also the case, but it's easier said than done, following your passion. And I'm sure if you had a look across your different colleagues in class, it's all right for somebody to say, especially one of the lecturers or different influential people in the institution, it's really important to follow your passion. How do you think that you were able to determine and understand what your passion was? What did it feel like that you knew that it was your passion? Because I think that's where people get stuck, actually. Yeah. They're told, follow your passion. And they're like, well, how am I supposed to know? Can you remember what it was that it felt like that you were, this is it? Maybe it's something I need to do, or I've got my own thoughts on it, but I'd love to hear your impression at that time.
I'll tell you a trick that we were told to do as students from some of our team that was helping us get through this year and find our first job. You know, everyone's really focused on your first contract after graduating. So they would coach us a lot. I had a lot of coaching during that year, which was something I was not expecting, and I really enjoyed it. So they told me on the very first few weeks, they said, okay, clearly you're a career changer and you're looking for your next move. So let me give you an example of something you can do that's very practical. And if you really get into it wholeheartedly, it will work. So we organize a lot of after conference. There's a lot of executives coming to Cornell for their exec ed programs. So they would mingle the students in cocktails or in little seminars or small events with some of the students. So we would mix with executives from everywhere in the world, very high up in the hospitality hospitality world. So we were all given business cards as students, and they said, look, if you don't know what you want to do yet, let's say I'm going to schedule you a cocktail, mingling, socializing with these executives, and they're all from F&B. You're going to wake up in the morning, and this is very American, the part of America that I really love. So it was go in the cocktail and you wear the hat of F&B. You are all F&B. You wake up in the morning and that's all you can think of. And you're going to talk to these executives, hand them out business cards, and you're going to say, my passion is food and beverage. My whole life, the only thing I can think of is food and beverage. And you're going to do it wholeheartedly. Don't think about it. Just do it and give everything you've got. And then you go home in the evening, take a good night's sleep. And when you wake up in the morning, you say to yourself, how did that feel? Was I in my best place? Did I feel this joy? Were these people inspiring me? Or did you wake up the next morning and thought, oh, that doesn't sound exciting at all? So they told us to do that. And I was like, okay, well, that's not very nice. I mean, I'm telling these executives this is my passion when I'm not sure it is. And they said to me, well, truth is, they're going to know if you're being truthful or not as well. So don't worry about telling them that this is your passion, because they will know straight away. You look them in the eyes and they will know, oh, she's not sure yet. So I started mingling with a lot of these executives that were in the spa industry. And just when you could entice them into saying what their passion was about their own life, and then when they spoke about their passion, you saw yourself. And that was it. Because these other people in other fields, and you could feel that everything was coming out. This is why I do this. It just didn't touch you. It didn't make your heart rate beating up as they were talking. And that happened to me with all the executives I met, which are now enormous leaders in the industry. And I remember they were also growing at the time, and they just knew it. They knew it was just this incredible, rewarding career path. And I felt very connected to that. So I woke up the next morning and I'm like, that's it. No idea how I'm going to do this, but I found it.
That's wonderful. It could well be, I'm just kind of throwing it out there, because it was in the earlier stage of the movement, it tended to attract people that were truly passionate about the business. They had some kind of calling in, because I presume in those days it was still really open. No one knew which direction it was going to be heading into. It was less determined, refined to a certain extent. There were lots of options. I guess why I'm relating to it, I was involved early in Europe in the extended stay space and alternative space for hospitality. And I just found it brilliant. Go to these conferences and there were just, everybody's in the same boat, all trying to figure it out, all exploring in different directions, all with a passion for doing something different with hospitality, and everyone aligned. There was more of this community aspect to it. But I would say 14 years have passed now since those early days in that space, and it's become much more institutionalized than it was before. So I wonder if there was also about timing with an early stage area within a space or a sector.
It was timing. Absolutely, you're right. There was a lot of excitement. There was a lot of will to do the right thing the right way, not to fall in some of the traps that other parts of hospitality had already fallen into and were being reinvented. So this was about creating something new rather than trying to reverse some of the standards or some of the habits that were being spread around the world in other parts of hospitality. It was also about lifestyle, I must say. Until today, I've always tried to make sure my career choices, I'm very career driven. I've moved my family around. My husband followed me to Cornell, and then we got married so that we could have a visa to go there. And then we moved to Asia. He followed me as well. Career has been a big part, a big driving force of our family life. But I always made choices that allowed me to have a great lifestyle. So I always tried to find corporate jobs so that I could work Monday to Friday. I would travel a lot. Sometimes I would be away from home for a long time. But when I was back home, then I had a stable, nice lifestyle. And I was able to do that because I was working in a niche market for smaller companies. I never went for the big corporations because I wanted to contribute. I wanted to change things. I wanted to be able to create create. So yes, I think that's also where you get your passion, where you get your drive, because you are able to make things work holistically. At least I speak for myself. I was able to combine having this right environment at work where I could be creative, I could help people, I could work closely with people and make change, but also I had a nice lifestyle to keep me healthy and going and open to new things. I had time to read, I had time to travel. And so it was a big combination of factors as well. It's not just finding, I want to do spa, that's all I can think of. It's all these things combined. And you're right, it was the beginning. So you could practically say, this is what I want to do. And there was a job out there for you.
I've got so many things at the moment spinning around. Some of the things that you're saying really resonating, but I think what's more impactful is the way that you're talking about how you were able to construct your life. It seems like even from that very early days where you seem to have this balance, you were also able, as you went through the journey, to create this balance. It's a very holistic approach to having your life. And actually, we've been talking a lot recently about holistic leadership, but it seems like it's a relatively new phenomena for people to say, actually, it's really important that I have a holistic approach to my life, that it's not all about my career and it's not all about putting 1,000% into something to be successful. What I really am appreciating from what you're saying is that you've been able to have this combination that's been working for you, but it seems as though it's driven from within, this desire to have this balance. The fact that you're in the wellness area and you're in an area which is promoting better health and mental health, wellness, I guess if you weren't feeling that yourself, it would be a very difficult thing to be engaged in. So I'm just kind of curious as how all this connects together. And I guess the other aspect is just going back to people being very passionate about this particular area. Do you also think that it's a calling to be involved in wellness, health, that therefore people generally who are involved in this area are passionate about it because it has an impact on people's lives potentially?
Absolutely. All the wellness industry and the spa industry at large are full of incredible practitioners that dedicate their life, their energy, their career to giving to people. I mean, if you're a spa therapist, if you're an esthetician, if you're a physiotherapist, if you're a coach, if you're a Reiki master, everything you do, all your energy, at least 40 hours a week, is spent giving it to people to improve their lifestyle. And this is very, very valuable. And I think that I'm not a practitioner myself. I manage these people. I give them the right conditions for them to do their job. And I appreciate their dedication a lot. I don't have it. I don't know what pleasure of having to give my hands or with my talent as a therapist to pass this to people. I only know from working very closely with them how they tell me that it enlightens their life. So I've always seen myself as someone that is preparing the path for these wonderful artists to perform their art. And that has been very rewarding because in terms of even hospitality and service, of course, when you set a table for a wonderful romantic dinner, you're doing exactly the same. And when you're preparing this wonderful resort and a wonderful stay for someone that is spending the last days of their life, or on the other hand, preparing for a birth of a new child, I mean, it's just always this service, this giving back to people. And I found a great connection with the practitioners of this industry early on. So I feel always that my calling is also to give them the right stage for them to perform in the best conditions, in the way that they can also be less constrained to rules and regulations and be more open to explore their talents. And I don't do that myself. I cannot do it. I know my calling is different. I'm in contact with all these people all the time that have worked with me, and this is really their life. When you have this sort of calling, it's a big part of who you are, and they have to work in the best conditions possible. And now I'm very much dedicated to creating also new concepts and to help them do things that they haven't been able to do yet, because it was just too standardized. It was just following steps that have been set up for decades now. And it's time that this industry also evolves to let these practitioners do what they know best. So I do find that the calling and the motivation of these practitioners is enormous, and that's very rewarding as well.
I love the expression, so preparing the stage so that they are able to perform to their top of their abilities, so that they can basically impart their gift, you called it, with those that are really ready to connect with them. It's a wonderful approach. However, you caveated it by saying that that's not your calling. So do you know what your calling is? Have you managed to figure that out?
Well, my calling is to put my creativity, my effort, my network, my connections, my knowledge, everything I've gained in every step of my life, and put it to use in a way that will benefit people, especially clients, being the owners of these places, but also the people that travel the world to come to these incredible places, but also the practitioners and the development of this art. I work a lot now with innovation, with technology, because I have this conviction, I believe that a lot of these practitioners will not be replaced by machines and technology, but they have to embrace the advance of technology in a way that will allow them to just do what they are really good at and eliminate a lot of steps that make their life probably more stressful and with a lot of anxiety in some aspects. So I'm a big advocate of using technology to remove that stress and anxiety of all those steps that you need to take to reach to a point where you can finally just one-on-one influence and affect people, and bringing that balance, because a lot of practitioners are very afraid of technology, and I'm thinking, no, technology is going to help us, because then we leave room for these very special one-on-one contacts with people that we will always need, even if it's at a distance. We need human connection. We need to talk to a human person to feel related to in a lot of our issues. So that's my calling. My calling is to make things move forward and to see it from afar as I created this and look at those people now interacting, and how rewarding is that? Kind of setting that stage, and to then be able to sit as the audience and see that art being performed and see people leaving the audience completely blown away, and being at the outside of the theater listening to everyone saying, oh, this completely blew my mind, it changed my life, oh, this is the best night ever, and feeling that energy, just all I need.
I love the analogy here that you're creating, and using the word creating and performance and artists, because it shows that it's a highly engaging experience that the clients, guests, people who are willing to get involved in this ultimately go on. Also, part of this is around transformation. One of the big aspects around health, wellness is around transformation. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit more. There's so many facets to this in terms of what do we mean by wellness. Just going back to the very early days, a quote 1948 by the WHO, I'm sure you know this. Health is a state of physical, mental, and social well-being. And then we can kind of fast forward, we can even question whether that's really been achieved yet, or where we are in that achievement. We could start with saying, where are we in terms of that being achieved? That's one angle. Where do you think we are today on that spectrum? The other angle, which I'd like to bring in, is a bit about the future in terms of what's coming up, because that's obviously very exciting. 1948, we're 72 years on from that statement. What's your thoughts? And I know that's a big question.
It is a big question. We've realized there are studies, we can read it, we can find all the data we want, but we are not effectively putting in practice this idea that health is something you build from early on, and it is very much based from the ground up. And we tend to think of health as the opposite of preparing our life to be as healthy as possible. We focus on fixing the problem when it appears. And there are different aspects of health. The physical health has been very developed since that statement, has been incredibly developed. We now know DNA, epigenetics, neuroscience. We are able to understand our physical being a lot better. There are interactions between systems mechanisms within our bodies that we didn't know about in 1940s, we didn't know about in 1960s. And now we have come to a place where we understand a lot better what is happening inside us. But we focus too much of that knowledge on the disease aspect.
Yeah, I guess a lot of that has progressed through sport. I mean, if you look at the improvement of excellence and performance in sport and all of the investment in that area, it's been huge. And obviously, there's many other aspects. For example, the advent of space and looking at the physical aspect in space. So you're right, on the physical aspect, there's been a huge amount of changes.
I think we missed the part of mental health, emotional health, everything that we now see as being the biggest causes of problems in people's lives, and later on becomes a disease as well. But it's the fact that our life has changed a lot, the purpose of our life, the way we live our daily tasks, where we live, the development of big cities, the traveling, career, education related to your career. So much has changed and the pace is so fast. And we ignore that part of reflection on how we are dealing with all of this as human beings. How is our ability to cope with all of these different inputs in our life? How is that being managed? And now suddenly we're all talking about mental health. We're all talking about this holistic approach to well-being, because well-being is really living well with absence of disease for as long as you can. And even when you have disease, living well with that disease as much as that is possible, where you come from, where you live, and even dying from that disease in the most holistic and well-being way possible, which is also such a big thing altogether. What I think we have missed is really a bigger understanding and people being naturally open to talking about starting this work early on in life. And we talked about that. How early do we have this ability to find balance in our lives? I work so much with practitioners, coaches, mentors, healers that treat people. The first thing they start is going back in their life, in the beginning of life, as you were a child, as you were in a certain social environment, the culture you were in. How much does that affect every little reaction you have right now in your life? And we don't do that as a habit. And that's the work that most people do right now with mental health, is to understand how much of your reactions, of your emotions, of your drive has been molded by all of these beliefs, these fears, these just interpretations that you had of your life growing up. And I think a great way now looking at the future is if it is all holistic, because we know it's holistic. So that statement is very well true. We just need to understand the holistic part, which is how do you bring this at ease with the way your mental state is being developed, your beliefs are being transformed, and how do you start working very early on shaping that in a way that when you come to your 30s and 40s, and you can probably go back to the way that life was a long time ago, which was a lot simpler, because now life has become a lot more complicated because there's too many inputs and we haven't been wired to deal with all these inputs. And we have also not been trained to deal with those inputs. So it's a complex issue. I think we definitely miss the preventative side of health, which is take care of ourselves from early stages, when we're teenagers, when we're young adults, when we're becoming more mature, when we have children, when the children mature and we have to support them. So in all those stages, we change and we become open to disease, to complications, to issues. And we have to deal with them step by step. And that's the way to lead this holistic approach to health.
You're absolutely right. There's so many complications that are occurring. Part of it is pace. Part of it is the increased pressure, as you mentioned, all of these different aspects impacting one's life. So everybody has a normal chain of events in life. I don't think those chain of events from childhood through to teenage years, through to kind of middle years, through to old age, those chain of events have been the same for millennia.
Absolutely.
The difference is that the pace of change, the complexity around us, the unpredictability, also the disconnection from communities. physical communities. We used to have all the support structure in place. We used to have all of those conversations. Everybody would be talking about the challenges that were going on. Now it's much harder to have that close physical community. And obviously we have technology that enables some of that. But the increased stress that goes along with the consequences of this transformation in society is also leading, ironically, to a decrease in happiness. And if you look at one of the metrics that some governments are looking at, also now some companies are looking at, and also ourselves, and we talk about it a lot. How am I feeling happy, right? How happy are you? Or trying to judge if somebody is happy or not. And it seems to be happiness is the output of the state of wellness of the individual, you could argue also of a society. However, even though actually our life expectancy has improved, if you look at some of the hard data that's gone on in the last 70 years, most of the things around the world for us have improved. And yet, I think you've highlighted it, the mental health aspect has been one of the things that has had a lot less focus over that time period compared to physical. And yet it's also so connected together. So I wonder how we can explore this a little bit, because during this crisis, it's become really apparent. There's been a lot of talk of stress, mental health, mental well-being, people not being able to perform. And actually, most of that performance has been linked to something impacting that individual extraneous from the crisis itself. Yes, there's been huge pressures placed on a lot of people, but it's normally something else that has allowed that person to either be able to cope with the situation or not be able to cope with the situation. We've been talking a lot in our various forums over the last several months about building your inner resilience and personal immunity with the belief that this should be built up before a crisis, before there's a challenge to the system, before there's an event that is going to put it under pressure, which is kind of what you were also implying, that these things need to be built up in a preventative way over a longer period of time, ideally from the beginning, ideally from when, I guess, children are small. There's always going to be this change. There's always going to be this continuous, probably exponential movement that we're going on. So I just wonder, how can we start to address this in our lives more openly? And if we kind of tie it back to hospitality a bit with regards to well-being of employees, if we're trying to deliver these wonderful services and experiences, how can we do that with our employees? How can we do it with ourselves? How can we do it as leaders? What things can we start to do to improve our state of mental well-being?
I think it starts with all of us as leaders being able to say confidently that most people right now in this world, the world that we live in, regardless of what is happening specifically with COVID-19, is people are not well most of the time. Research has just come out that in the US, 1/3 of Americans have reported that they are living with anxiety, compared to less than 10% the same time last year. And we're talking about people that were actually able or committed to realizing they have anxiety, because a lot of people have anxiety. Most of us live with stress on a daily basis. Stress has become a normal way of living your life because it's fast-paced. Life expectancy, for example. Humans used to live, we would start working when we were 12, 13, and then we would die when we were 40. I mean, if someone would live until 60, they were this rare exception. And now you're supposed to work your whole life to move forward in your career, to support your children, to start seeing your grandchildren, to retire at 65, and then live until you're 101. I mean, you're supposed to live almost 40 years in retirement, feeling happy about yourself and still contributing to family life when they probably are far away from you, which, as you said very well, before we used to have all these support systems, the senior part of the family was living, they were molding, coaching the little ones and making them reflect on life because they were already reflecting on their own life. And now we don't have as much contact with those types of family influences as well. So beyond that, most people live with stress and anxiety in their life. And this is not taboo. This should not be a stigma. This is the reality. It's impossible that people don't live with stress in their lives most of the time. And stress leads to a lot of non-communicable diseases, which is the biggest problem in health nowadays in the world. The cause of death is not by viruses. It's not by bacteria. We've evolved tremendously on that. It's cancer because of lifestyle. It's diabetes. It's heart conditions. All of that comes from this accumulated stress and a disconnect between hearing the symptoms of this stress, being honest about those symptoms of stress, and finding ways and having support from your company, from your group of friends, from your spouses, from your children, and from the government and the culture around you to find ways and mechanisms to bring down that stress so that you don't have those diseases and you live a happier life. Because I think happiness should be related to events in your life that make you feel extremely special. You cannot have happiness on a daily basis. Then happiness is not as special anymore. I think it's about living a balanced life. And balanced life does not mean you have to give up your career, you have to give up having kids, you have to give up traveling. You should be able to do all these things because the reality is the changes in our society, I think, are just starting. We're going to live even longer. We're going to be able to travel to space. We're going to be able to do even more things. Technology development is, in my opinion, just starting. So we need to understand what human mechanisms are to deal with our ability to cope with this new way of living. Because our DNA has not been programmed to deal with this in this level of pace, at least. So our human bodies, our metabolism is getting used to it. We are evolving. Internally, we are getting our own mechanisms to cope with this development. But mentally, the way that we say, wait a minute, let me be honest with myself and understand that I'm not doing well. And then I don't necessarily have to go to a therapist and hide it from my loved ones to take care of my own mental well-being. I should be able to get that from different parts of my life, from my family, from my colleagues at work, from my boss. That should be a normal conversation. Just like working with clean air and working with the right lighting and an ergonomic chair, all of that has been established that is a necessity, but that's a lot more physical or body physical health related. Let's now talk about the ability to cope. We're not machines. We cannot be great leaders, empathetic, creative, analytical, great at communicating. We stand wonderfully in front of a camera. We are great. It's impossible. We're not superhumans.
It's impossible, but that's been the expectation. That there has been the obligation, maybe is too strong, but at least the expectation that there's a disconnect from how one potentially feels and how one performs. And what I like about what you're saying is that it seems to be that there is a much more appreciation today for the awareness first, the personal awareness, maybe because of the dialogue around this, which is a good start, the recognition, but then also the communication, the ability to be able to talk about this, even if it's minor, right? Even if it's a relatively minor situation, how you're feeling, maybe you're not having a good day, the ability to be able to say that openly in a environment, especially corporate environment, which it could in itself already start the healing process of, wow, I'm actually feeling a little bit better from that because I don't have to bottle it up. I don't have to wait till the end of the day. I grew up in the 70s, 80s. So I started my career in the 90s. It was about being on. You were expected to be on, right? You were expected to be present, be there, be engaged, be positive all the time. And especially the longer you work, that's a big ask. And so at some point, as you said, happiness is not necessarily something that you can have every day. Being on all the time is not something that is, I think, natural to the human instinct or our capabilities. either.
Well, and I think it's the way you are on. I mean, I'm on all the time. When I had my brain scan done, we'll talk about that in a little bit. My brain assessment was very clear. I don't switch off when I'm sleeping. And I don't have sleep problems yet, but it's already very likely that I will start to have sleep issues because I'm working all the time. And I'm a mother of 3 and I'm caring spouse, I hope, family person, love to spend time with my friends and I network and I read. It's a lot if you try to do all of this. And on the other hand, apparently when I sleep, I'm still wired. I'm still on. So eventually this will take a toll on my life somehow. So I'm aware of that. It helps me a lot. I am waking up less and less and I haven't done anything special about it. I'm just aware. When I go to bed, I know I cannot talk about what I have to do tomorrow. I told my husband already, don't talk to me about an issue that we have pending in our life that you want to talk about 5 minutes before we go to sleep, because then it will be on my mind the whole night. But I work at night. I'm sleeping and I'm being creative. I'm creating things. I'm having ideas. And that's something, it just happens within me. But I'm aware of it. And that helps me a lot. And I'm aware that I very often need to switch off and take time off because I don't stop. And then I have less patience. I have less ability to listen to others because I have so much going on. I just want to put it all out there. Again, I am aware and I have done that exercise, which I see, these therapists that I work with and healers and all, they all go back to 2 things. One is the past and the other one is you with yourself. Even as a leader, if you are not honest with yourself about your good things and your bad things and how you react to bad moments, how you look for good moments, how you live on being on as almost an addiction or not, or how you procrastinate, all of those little things that make you an executive, a business person, a leader, you have to be very honest about what they are, because only then you can understand how you're projecting yourself to others, and then you can understand others a lot better. You will be less likely to make assumptions on other people's attitudes because you're able to see them in a way that you've learned to really dissect on yourself. So sometimes people start by judging others. I mean, if you go to therapy, that's the first thing any therapist will talk to you, no matter where you are, in Asia, no matter where they come from, what type of practitioner they are, they will always go back to that because it's true. It's about you with yourself. And there was a lot this idea of then we are to blame. If we do something wrong, then it's our problem. Well, it's not really our problem because the way I'm able to be honest with myself is also dependent on the conditions that I live in, the type of boss that I've had, the type of mentor that I have, the culture of the company that I work for. Because if that company doesn't constantly ask me to do that reflection myself, and honestly, not on a survey at the end of the year on
how happy are you?
How happy or how comfortable you are relating to others and how do you feel your empathy level is. Really, really doing that exercise because that's something we lack. And I think to cope with this mechanism and to avoid falling into the trap of taking medications and heavily relying on therapy to cope with anything and doing that in a more holistic way is what we should all find. And all of us have different ways. I mean, you like to read, I don't like to read, I like to listen to music, you have no patience or you have no musical knowledge. And there's all these different things that each person should develop, in my opinion, from an early stage to cope with these. How am I doing? How am I really doing? That conversation I had with my spouse the other day, how was that? What did I really say? What did I really want to say that I wasn't able to do? Same with my boss, same with my employees. And that ability to self-evaluate, which I now am completely fascinated with using technology to support that, because I think that's marvelous, because now you can really put it to use. I think that's what you know about yourself, and then you're able to check it. That's
So I think we just need to recap that little bit. It's all about focusing on yourself. There's something I would like to try and do more of, and I've put myself in a position where I'm just trying to think about it. It's called fast reflection. It's basically, I would like to fast reflect on a situation or an occurrence that has impacted me in a small way where I feel out of kilter. And I want to do that as soon as I can afterwards when I feel that something wasn't right. Now, it's about having your own approach, your own mechanisms. As you said, it could be meditation, it could be playing the piano, it could be all of these things. But let's move into assistance, because we're looking for solutions. People say, go and make yourself better, right? So the normal protocol would be, okay, you go and see a therapist. And if that's not enough, maybe you get some medication and then et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But there's a whole universe opening up, and maybe the phrase itself is alien to a lot of people and may not sound the most positive way, biohacking. All right, that's the term that's being used for it. But essentially, they're defined as the new pioneers of wellness. These companies, these opportunities, these entrepreneurs that are looking at ways that we can essentially enhance our well-being through the use of technology. And it's going in all different dimensions, whether it's maybe give some context for the audience who may not be familiar to start with. And then we can go into how this could potentially help with mental health. And I know that this is early, okay, for a lot of people, especially our audience, but I would like them to bear with us because this is a critical field. Mental health is a critical field that we do get right because it underpins absolutely everything with regards to our well-being. And it's normally one of the things that if it does go wrong, it's at the current time very hard to try and rebuild. And I can speak from personal experience, having had a close family member who went through a very serious situation over the last few years, which has not just impacted her, but has impacted the whole family and the whole circle. So I really can see how it's a long rebuild. And for those people that have had people in that situation or have been there, it's not a situation that any of us want to be in. And it's not a situation any of us want to see other people in because it has an impact on every aspect: health, physical, eating, diet. I mean, all of the things, they just spiral from there. But maybe give some context to this environment that we're starting to see ourselves in.
Biohacking is just at its early stages of development. And it's this concept that because things have not really evolved and there's not as many mechanisms and solutions for people to cope with all of these new systems of living, it is basically the idea that you can alter, enhance some of the ways that your body is functioning to achieve a different level of performance. So biohacking can be, and they have people, there are scientists that have in their garage, in their basement, implemented certain devices in their brains or chip in their arm to try to do some sort of different measurement or data collection and interfere with the way that our body is functioning and test the results. So this is completely done, not officially. These are scientists training or trying to say, for example, if we can do mechanisms of photosynthesis similar to plants, for example. So they implement systems within their cells to see if they collect sunlight. I mean, there's just all these crazy things happening. That's one side of biohacking. To me, that is the real biohacking, which is playing with your own body system and try to fiddle with it in a way to see test reactions that we haven't yet studied. So there are kind of a pre-step to something that could be largely studied and developed later on. So these are scientists really testing the way your biology works and how you can enhance your body's performance in many different ways. So that is one side of biohacking. Now, some of these have moved to real products, real services, and even in scientific evolution, if we look at epigenetics, for example. So epigenetics is the part of the DNA, the ability to influence how some of your genes express by making changes in your lifestyle. So there's part of your DNA, if you have a DNA test, part of it is there, has been yours forever and is not going to change. You may look at it and have an idea of some propensity to develop a disease, for example, because in your family it has happened, it has come to you in your genes in a way that is determinate, and you can understand it early on. But that's a very small fraction of your expression of your DNA. There's other parts of your DNA that you can basically influence, and most of that can be influenced by changes in your lifestyle. The food that you eat, how you are able to avoid stress so that stress does not influence certain expression of a gene that is going to make you more likely to have a stress-related disease, an autoimmune disease, develop a heart condition. So there's part of that DNA that you can influence by making certain changes in your lifestyle. Again, lifestyle, the way you cope with things on a daily basis today, because everything you've done before has already had its influence. And that is also one way of playing with your biology and measure it. So you can test your epigenetics. Basically, what you will receive is parameters that are very early stages, but very interesting to look at, that tell you your biological age versus your actual age. So you can see if you're falling behind or not. A lot of great data on metabolism and the way you're able to cope with a lot of these inputs from your life. And then you measure it after 3 months, 6 months, and then you can work out a plan. So these are new approaches to wellness. So it's wellness based on biological data, some more scientific, some, through your wearables or things that are still being tested. But is this idea that you're going to look at ways to enhance the way your body is expressing itself. And hopefully a lot of it, not just to make us superhumans. Of course, there's a lot of the early adopters of these innovations. If we look at the fitness side, for example, there's all these gyms with all these equipment with infrared cryotherapies and a lot of different techniques that are labeled as biohacking, but they're in fact things that have been around for a long time, being used in this more high-tech, cool, for these early adopters of biohacking, the ones that will not go in the basement and hack themselves, but they are finding lighter ways to just further speed up the response to their fitness workout or to their ability to relax. With the development of IoT and brain-computer interface, there's going to be even a lot more development of biohacking systems and brands and products. It's really just starting.
The reason we're going into this is twofold. One is obviously around mental health and well-being and how this area could potentially help individuals in the future, but also related to hospitality, if we're looking for experiences and transformation, and we're ultimately going forward, concepts are gonna have to offer something special for people to engage with them. And obviously, the further you can move in that direction, I would say the more differentiation, the more following you're going to be able to have. Because people are going to say, well, I've got very limited time. I have all these other things. If I can go somewhere and spend some time for a break, for a time off, whatever it's going to be, I want to feel better than when I arrived, in whatever shape or form that's going to be. And obviously, people will choose how they want to do it. But the opportunity there is massive for the hospitality industry to embrace this area. But also the other aspect is, more importantly, integrating it within our own well-being. So just as a throwaway comment, the conscious hacking movement, I think you're aware of this, they are saying that they will be creating something that will be the equivalent of 10,000 hours of meditation.
Yes.
So it's going to be transforming potentially to those that would use it.
We will get there in terms of technology. Absolutely. We are very close to a lot of systems and mechanisms that all of us will be able to plug into and test and find whichever works better for us. Just like a simple meditation, a walk in the mountain. I mean, now we're going to have technology to supply us with these enhancement systems that get us to a point much faster, much quicker. I think first, as always, is where do we want to go when we find the right system for us? What I do think is I'm very connected to both sides now professionally. The biohacking community, the tech developers, and the hospitality. And the hospitality industry is years ahead of the level of experiences that these companies are putting together with their technology. technology. So I'm a big advocate nowadays, and it's what I do with clients also, especially in the consulting side, is we in hospitality are already instinctively the masters of experience creation. I mean, we've had gained this sensitivity to how design is influencing experience, how the flow of the guest journey, how the culture of service is so important. We know how to do this intrinsically.
It's thousands of years old, right? It's one of the oldest professions, hospitality, if you take it back, right? So it should be instinctive to a certain extent.
And I think it is. I think in that sense, the industry has developed beautifully. And this technology now is looking desperately for a setting where it can really flourish and it can be in contact with people without just being a purely B2C business that you order, you get a packet at home and you use it. What I think hospitality should really look at now is people need, as you say, they have limited time. They want to go to a place, they want to disconnect, they want an experience. We are doing that in very simple ways, but if we can bring this new body of knowledge, these new experts, this new technology, and provide a space that is safe, that is comfortable, that is well designed, it was already there. And we can now bring these programs, these experiences, and include them in a flow, a journey, and be supported by other people while you are using this technology, while you're being put in touch with this data and you have someone to support you through that. It's a lot more effective because a lot of these biohacking experiences, if they are just left for the user to just feel compelled to use it, to get used to make it part of their daily routine, because you might use it one day and you put it aside and then there's no effects to it. You need to continuously recur to it. But first you probably need someone, a setting, and a decision to go somewhere and have someone really take you through the benefits and explain it to you. And you can probably use it in a more of a community space where you have other like-minded people like you that are testing it, and then you see their feedback. So you feel a lot more normal by doing it. So I think that's where the hospitality setting is so well positioned to welcome these new technology developments and these new people and practitioners and programs. And because we have the stage again in the hospitality world, and we should be more open to have conversations with these developers so that they can have the stage to put their new art and their new advances, because they're going to bring enormous benefit to the world and they're going to really make positive change. But again, you always need guidance. You always need someone to explain to you the benefits. And when you're put in a special setting, in a special experience, and you have this experience at the same time, between the placebo effect and the ability that you've switched off just to focus on yourself and how you relate to others, and you are going through this experience, the effects are tremendous. So everyone benefits. So that collaborative aspect that we spoke about before, it's just so important to have right now in the hospitality wellness development. That's my belief.
It ticks a lot of boxes, right? I mean, it's really an opportunity for hospitality and technology to merge. I mean, we're seeing that anyway through other hospitality tech companies, but I think through the experience side, this is where we can really see it coming to the fore. It's an improvement in the mental and also potentially physical and overall well-being, some of these experiences. But the other angle is the community. In some ways, it's no different from doing a yoga retreat for the first time and then carrying on with it afterwards. But that very first time, being part of that community, being part of that experience, that's the anchor to then how this could potentially move forward. I love the idea of blending thousands of years of hospitality with, I would say, decades of technology to move into the future. We're all looking for innovation in the hospitality space. This is definitely one area that should be integrated and at least investigated and explored and tested further. Let's take this back a little bit. How can we bring this to a holistic rounding of the overall topic? You obviously have your own involvement with a very specific company at the moment. Maybe you want to give some context because you're very involved in this space. I also see there's a huge opportunity there because I think that could be a radical shift of how we see things going forward as well.
Yeah, so I'm involved in a neuroenhancement company. So we are about to launch a very immersive experience, which targets, obviously, with my involvement, initially more high-end resorts, medical centers, clinics that are focused on well-being or maintaining, improving people's lifestyles. That is related to neuroscience and your ability to understand how your brain functions right now, how your brain reacts, how your brain behaves in different situations. And from that understanding, developing a very personalized plan of brain enhancement, which means very simply training your brain to shut down certain things that interfere with your normal functioning, or improving or fostering even other parts of your brain that used to be more active, at least you believe they were more active, and now you don't feel them as active, like creativity, for example. It's about putting people very much in contact and getting to know their brain, because their brain will just give them a sense of how much of how they behave is explained by this organ that we don't always look at, hardly ever really look at. So we understand that it's because this subconscious and very active also behavior of our brain is influencing how we react to things. It's also influencing sometimes negatively with noise and interference with our capability to have a more clear, more creative, more emotionally driven reaction to life. So these personalized protocols are developed for a certain period of time. You don't fix it in one day. But again, it's about bringing that change to your life, supported by a constant review of how your brain is improving in the sense that you want it to be. So because I was involved, this tech company realized that the early innovators, the early adopters of this technology are already frequently going to multiple wellness centers and hospitality destination resorts. So we are going to them with this very immersive technology. And later on, through a number of steps that could take us 2 hours to go through, become a more accessible technology that can be, it's something you can order on Amazon and it will be brought to you, and you will be able to give yourself that brain assessment, but also that personalized protocol on how to reach the goal that you want.
Just for the audience, Mariana, the name of the company?
So Field. It's experiencefield.com, but the name of the company is Field.
And what I like about what you're doing is the accessibility part, because you're right. A lot of the cutting edge insights, research, technology approaches have to a certain extent been very expensive, right? So those with the fortune to be in a position to be able to afford these approaches have been able to have access to it. What I like about, and I hope you're able to go in this direction, and I know it's one of your objectives as a company, is the accessibility of this technology to a much wider population. Can you explain why that's important to you?
The mission of our company is to bring change collectively to the world by allowing us to use this neuroscientific knowledge to improve our lives. But if 5 people improved our lives, there's no impact in the global well-being of people. Only when almost everyone, and we cannot say everyone, but as many people as possible are able to access this technology and to go through these protocols themselves, then we will have a radical change to how we live our lives. And if you look at the why and the mission of this company is not to develop the most immersive, unique, personal, everyone is doing that. We are about pushing hard on funding, on commitment from our investors, on collaborations with other organizations, even creating organizations in our free time just to help this process, because that's the only way that we will make this a systematic global change. And it's by everyone's brains and everyone's systems being holistically working better that then we can make change in the world collectively. So it's this idea of changing things collectively by all of us being able to perform better. And we are really interested in that long-term collective influence of the well-being in general. It has always been our vision vision of later on having a platform that people can easily connect with, and they are able to see their wellness in all these different perspectives. We're going to start with the brain. The brain is, of course, the most impactful regardless. And that's where we are really moving in the long term to this collective improvement of lifestyles and life. So it has to be accessible. It has to be democratized. It has to be built as a business model with this focus early on. You cannot capture investment because you're doing high-end immersive experiences unless they are able to connect. And most of the investors, that's the part they are interested in, the democratization, the accessibility. And it's not just to monetize on that because we could do so many other things. It's also because that's the only way to make change. That's our mission, and we're not going to move away from that. It's just the time technology costs, they evolve very rapidly, and we are fortunate to be now in a position that with certain investment and focus, the technology will become a lot more accessible, and we will be ready for that.
I think what you're doing is brave. It's a positive. I think in terms of collective, whatever you want to call it, consciousness, awareness, there's a lot of studies with regards to the percentage of people globally that would shift the dynamic of the global population. I think it's around a third, but I'm sure somebody will correct me in the notes if that's incorrect. What I would like to add as a footnote to this is for those listening that find it scary and say that, wow, that's something I would never try. I would like you take a pause, as I did when I heard it for the first time, and just think about how quickly we would take a medicine or a drug if we were prescribed it because we were told we were stressed or we were anxious or we needed to take a break or we weren't feeling well, and how we would do that without any thought whatsoever because we would know that those administering that drug, or we would think that those administering the drug, have our best interests at heart. What I like about having reflected on this is a new world and it's a new opportunity, and there is many avenues that are being explored with regards to mental health. And I know there's a whole other movement which we won't go into, but there is another movement with regards to microdosing on psychedelics and all these different things that are also looking for the improvement in this particular area, creating greater awareness and consciousness. Just to loop back to your childhood, when you looked around the classroom and said, why isn't everybody experiencing what I'm experiencing?
Yeah.
Maybe in the future that will be the case, not in a scary way, but in a positive way, where we build in this inner resilience and personal immunity for the future so that we're able to tackle these challenges and changes as they occur in a more positive light and a more balanced and calm, reflective light so that we are not impacting those around us negatively. And what I would like to say is that going back to 1948, we still haven't achieved the objectives of the WHO, which is a state of physical and mental and social well-being for everybody on the planet. We still have a long way to go. However, I am feeling very optimistic that we're moving in the right direction. And once again, I'm feeling excited about the hospitality industry has to offer with regards to this, the innovation, and also yourself. It's just great, Mariana, to have somebody so inspiring, an entrepreneur, creator, collaborator, bringing all these different elements together through a personal mission where you felt in a position that you were privy to a feeling and state that others weren't. And you want to be able to kind of share that with others, which I just think is wonderful. So I just wanted to say, Mariana, thank you very much. Any final thoughts, suggestions, comments?
Thank you so much, Jonathan. It was great, as are always our conversations. I think really this idea of embracing a bit more the ability we have already within us to find new ways of delivering great experiences, to collaborate more. This has been a message I try to give people as much as possible, because I think really it's not only about us, it's not about the individual, it's not about brands, it's about the communities we're in, the social aspect, making significant change. And change takes time, but it's rewarding. It's always positive, for even from a business perspective, a personal fulfillment perspective. So driving change and implementing change and then seeing its success is just, to me, always the most rewarding thing. So as much as we can as professionals in this industry to do that, the better. There's space to do it. Don't be scared. Go for it. There's so many different things to do, and we can definitely make change happen. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mariana. It's been absolutely wonderful, and we'd love to be part of this journey with you as well. Okay, thanks to everybody listening, and enjoy the rest of your day.